Hey guys, Mila the Hangry Woman here, and today I'm doing a video about what I wish I knew when I was first diagnosed with diabetes. If you're new here, I am a diabetes lifestyle content channel. I talk about living with diabetes, little tips and tricks to just make life with diabetes a little bit better. We do some cooking stuff here. So if you're into any of that and just learning more about how to live life with diabetes, this is the channel to follow. Be sure to hit subscribe and also give this video a thumbs up if you like it. Let's dive into my thoughts about this. For some context for everybody, I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes in 2016, and then 4 years later in 2020, I was re-diagnosed and found out that I was misdiagnosed with type 2 and re-diagnosed with LADA, or Latent Autoimmune Diabetes in adults. And all that means is that I have a slow progressing form of type 1 diabetes that I was diagnosed with as an adult, and eventually I will lose function in my pancreas, so my pancreas won't produce insulin anymore. But it also means that I tested positive for diabetes antibodies, which is a signal of autoimmune type 1. When I first got diagnosed with diabetes, I was distraught. Like, I had thought all of these terrible things about myself. I had thought that I had done my body a disservice, that I did just like an injustice to me and to myself. And I had to kind of unlearn those thoughts over time. And when I look back, and I have a video about my type 2 diagnosis as well as my LADA re-diagnosis, when I think back, I just think about how hard on myself I was. And one thing that I wish that I knew in the forefront is that diabetes is not your fault. I think whenever they diagnose you and describe diabetes, it's really looked at as like you ate too much food and you didn't exercise enough, because that's the feedback that you get in the doctor's office about what to change to control your diabetes. So I wish that I would have gotten a deeper explanation of what my body was functioning like and how it was functioning. With type 1 diabetes, your beta cells are attacking your pancreas, and so you're not making any insulin anymore. Like, there's no insulin production. And you also have diabetes antibodies that signal this. In type 2 diabetes, you are insulin resistant. So it's not that you're too fat or you're lazy or that you're not doing the right things. It's that your body literally is resistant to the insulin that you're producing, and you need a little extra help through medication, like oral medications, insulin, injectables, to be able to like reduce that insulin resistance so that your body puts glucose into the cells properly. I think when you're first diagnosed, it's really hard to understand that you have no fault in it. And essentially, with the stigmas and the ways that people talk about type 2 diabetes and type 1 diabetes kind of gets lumped into each other, it's hard to see that. It's hard to see past the stigmas. So I wish that, that would have been explained to me at the forefront, that like, this is what your body is doing and here's how we're going to fix it, and not necessarily just like, you have diabetes, eat right, exercise more, and come back and see me in 3 months. I think that I would have had a better understanding and also more acceptance to having diabetes had I known that it wasn't my fault. I wish I knew that medication wasn't a punishment. I always thought that going on medication meant failure. I always thought that it meant that I didn't do things right, that I didn't work as hard as I could have to control diabetes. And I feel like that's a huge myth. Medications are not inherently bad. I think people tend to make it seem like medications are poison, but they're really just creating a response in your body so your body does the thing it's supposed to do. And for me, I wish that I would have known that, because I would have chosen to go on insulin sooner. I thought that insulin was like, you're doing such a poor job that you can't manage diabetes on your own, when insulin is a natural hormone in your body. Most people's bodies make insulin, or most people's bodies use insulin properly. And so to me, having this thought like, oh my God, if I go on insulin, it means that I'm a failure. It means that I did all of these things wrong. It means that I didn't work or try hard enough, is just purely a myth. And I wish I would have done it sooner, because I would have gotten good control over diabetes a lot sooner, instead of trying to struggle and then beating myself up and having this moment of like, I can't do anything right. So medicine isn't a punishment, and I wish that that was something that I knew early on. I wish I knew that being misdiagnosed was a possibility. And I say that because it's a huge possibility. It happened to me. It's not completely rare. I think about 10% of people diagnosed with type 2 diabetes are actually misdiagnosed and have LATA, but just aren't tested for antibodies because they show them markers of type 2, which are family history, being overweight, and having high blood sugars. So if you're not tested for the antibodies and you don't know that you can be tested for them, you don't know that there's a possibility that you could be misdiagnosed. And it was only because I had friends who had been misdiagnosed who said, like, you really need to push to get your antibodies tested. If you don't have antibodies and you do have type 2, it's good that you know. It's good that you know that you're on the right track. But if you don't get tested and you do have antibodies, and one day your pancreas suddenly poops out and you can't produce any insulin, your blood sugars get really high, you get ketones, you have diabetic ketoacidosis, you land in the hospital, like, you don't want to be on that path and on that track. So it was only because of friends of mine who had gone through a similar situation had said, like, you really, really need to push to get tested, that I did. And before that, it never crossed my mind that I could be misdiagnosed. People would say it here and there. People would tell me it's possible, this does happen to people, and a bunch of people would tell me your story about the way that you like got diagnosed and have diabetes, like, it just doesn't seem right or proper. To me, that kept signaling, okay, something is wrong. Like, I keep hearing people say this, and I didn't know that misdiagnosis was a possibility. I thought you knew or you didn't know. And it is a possibility, and especially if you don't meet like the T1D look. And what I mean by that is that you're skinny, or that you're child, or that you're, you don't have any like cardiovascular issues, things like that. Like, because I had a family history, because I was overweight, because I had high blood sugars, like, it was not believed that I could have type 1. And so I was never tested for it. And it wasn't until like struggling for 4 years that I finally got a good answer. And I finally got a doctor who said, let's actually test you for the antibodies. So I wish that I had known that that was a possibility, because I think I would have fought harder and pushed harder in the beginning to get more answers, instead of just accepting it as it was, because who knows, where I would be now if that were the case and that happened. I wish I knew how freaking expensive diabetes was gonna be. After medications, like, I take 4 oral medications, all for diabetes. I take insulin for diabetes. I take once weekly Ozempic for diabetes. So I'm taking 6 medications. Luckily, I have great insurance. Luckily, my husband works a great job, and we're lucky to have that insurance. If that ever went away, like, I literally have no idea how I would afford diabetes. And I'm not even on the expensive side. Like, I use multiple daily injections, so I don't do a pump yet. Pumps are super expensive. I just am lucky in the place that I am, but, we do have kind of like a savings account, like, just in case something happens and, we have to pay out of pocket like $1,000 for insulin. We at least know, that we're covered, we're safe. But I think that is one thing that nobody tells you. It's so expensive to be sick, between the medications, between the doctors and specialist visits, because you don't just have to go see the endocrinologist every 3 months. You also have to, I see also a primary care physician. I see an eye doctor. I see a dentist. So I have like I see a cardiologist. Like, I have like a whole group of specialties around me. And it gets pricey, it gets expensive, it gets hard to manage. Sometimes you have to skip a doctor's appointment because you're like, I don't have the money to like pay the copay for this, which also like kind of screws you up in the long run, because if you do skip a doctor's appointment, often you won't get prescribed the medication that you need. And like, it's just a lot, and just a lot to think about. So that's one thing that I wish that I would have known. It's not like I can change anything about it. So it's one of those things that's like, if I would have known, it would have been a heads up, but there's nothing that I could have done to make this different. So I think that that's like always the hard part. It'd be nicer to know ahead of time that like, you know, my life would be a little bit different financially, but what would it change? I mean, I still have to take medicine and buy it and go to the doctor. Like, it doesn't really make a difference or change anything. I think one last thing I would have liked to know about diabetes and having diabetes is that there is support and there's comfort and that you are not alone. I think a lot of us are diagnosed in a vacuum and we're too ashamed to say anything or to tell anyone or to let anybody know. And then we live with our own shame for so long by ourselves, and it's something that we stew in. It's something that's like hard to cope with. And I think it's really important to know that there are tons of support groups, not on Facebook. Don't join the ones on Facebook. They're toxic and awful. But there are lots of support groups. Twitter is a great place if you have diabetes to just lurk and see people talking about diabetes in general. Instagram has a really good community of people talking about diabetes and what it's like to live with it. There are support groups in terms of apps. So I run an app called T2D Healthline. That is an app for people with type 2 diabetes. And it's just like a safe place for people to go to be able to talk and commiserate and get out their frustrations without being judged or without being like ridiculed. And I think that that is really important. So if you're newly diagnosed and you feel like you don't know what to do or you don't know where to turn, there are resources that can help you understand more about diabetes and connect with people who are living with diabetes, so you don't have to feel so alone and like you're the only one, because I promise you're not the only one, and you're not the only one who feels the way you feel. Like, everybody, I think, has a moment of like sadness about having diabetes. And then as you meet more people and you learn more about diabetes, it gets easier and easier. One other thing I wish I would have known is that you can do the same thing twice and get completely like radically different results. So like you can eat a banana one day and your blood sugar is like, cool, I'm perfect, I'm fine. And then the next day it's like, it blows up out of the water. So I think that, it's hard to prepare for life with diabetes because everything just changes like at a whim, and sometimes one thing will work for you and then a couple days later it won't. And I wish that I would have known that. I think that would have saved me a lot of frustration. All right, guys, so that's it for my video today. I want to know what you wish you knew about diabetes before you were diagnosed or when you were diagnosed. I think it's a really interesting conversation, what you didn't know then that you do know now that you wish you knew. So leave it down below in the comments. I would love to hear what you guys think about what things that you've learned that you think would have helped you early on. And like I said before, if you liked this video, be sure to leave a thumbs up. If you like my channel, be sure to subscribe. I love this little community of people we have here. We have great conversations about diabetes, and it's just so fun to have all of you along for this same journey. So I really appreciate you guys watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves. Bye.